What is happening, everybody? It is time for MLB Live Before Lock. And then, of course, after this, we're going to have NBA Live Before Lock in a little bit, then the post-lock show over on Playback. So lots of content coming your guys' way. For now, though, myself and Matt Belman breaking down tonight's baseball slate. It's 11 games. We got lots of options to choose from. There's a Coors Field game. If you guys have questions for us, throw them into YouTube. Throw it into Discord if you're a Stochastic sub and at me so I can see any of those questions. If you haven't done yet as you're coming in, like the video. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Helps us out a whole bunch. Helps keep our content free around here. Matt, what's happening, man?
Nothing, man. We got a wild Friday night slate. Most of the slates we've had recently have been really spread out ownership because we haven't had a Coors or a Dodgers in, Great American Ballpark. Tonight we've got both. So kind of a different slate than we've seen recently. Not great pitching options. I talked it over with Laffy this morning. I'm excited to talk it over with you again tonight.
Yeah, and I'm really interested to see, too, what ends up happening with some of the ownership, considering there is the Coors Field game and, some of these other moving parts that we have here as well. And ultimately what it is that we decide we want to do with our lineups. How do we want to play single entry? And, our data and tools typically is pretty high on some of these Coors Field spots. And today, no different at all. Another spot where our tools are liking it a whole bunch. I am kind of curious too. One thing I want to ask you right before we get started, and it's something we're going to be touching on a little bit later as well. Which team do you think is going to be more popular in single entry, the Phillies or the Dodgers?
I think it's a classic. You're going to see pieces of both really high owned and pieces of them not high owned. As a full stack, I'm going to say Philly. But I think it's really close. And I think you're going to see a few Dodgers and a few Phillies amongst the highest owns. How do you see it?
Man, it's tough. It's tough. I think it's going to be, even though we have the Dodgers project for a little bit more ownership, just because it's Coors Field game, I think it's going to be the Phillies.
Yeah, same. That said, the Phillies, for who they are very expensive. Their pricing is more expensive than the Dodgers, especially with the lineup the Dodgers put out today. So that might hamper it a little bit. I'm really curious which team comes in higher owned. I really am as well. I really think it's going to be a case of some of each team's going to be amongst the highest owns. As a full stack, Philly slightly higher owned. I'm with you.
All right, so let's start breaking it down. And then also, as we start to talk about pitching, I want to ask you just an overarching question. Considering the popularity on teams like the Dodgers, teams like the Phillies, how is that going to inform the pitchers you're looking to target? Are you looking to get expensive? Are you looking mid-range? Are you trying to say hey, I need to get at least one cheap pitcher into some lineup so I could pay up for some offense? So before we're talking about the individual pitchers here, how does the offense in some of these spots like the Dodgers and the Phillies inform the pitchers you might be looking at?
So it matters to me, but I can't talk about a general overview of pitchers without singling out an individual pitcher, because more than anything on this slate, the Phillies, the Dodgers, whatever offense, Zach Gallen is my ultimate priority. I think he is so far and away the best pitching option on this slate, especially if the weather in Chicago calls for Burns not to be in play, that he's my priority. Other than that, I think the offenses take precedent. So Gallen for me, then the offenses, then everyone else.
Yeah, and for reference here, as we're starting to talk about the pitchers, there isn't a crazy amount of ownership going to Zach Gallen, believe it or not, at home against the Miami Marlins. There isn't a single pitcher on the entire slate projected for 30+% ownership. And if we look at, where is he? Zach Gallen, 10,300. And this is where I think the pricing and the popularity of some of these offenses matter. If we didn't have these great offenses in the Dodgers, the Phillies, and Coors Field to be getting to today, I think the field would be all over Zach Gallen. But because the field is paying up for offenses, we have a pitcher here in Zach Gallen who's $10,300 projected for, some ownership for sure at 20.6%, but it's not overwhelming kind of ownership. So Matt, we've got three pitchers that are priced above 10K. It's Imanaga, who's just been insane this year, projected for just 1% ownership at 11K. Corbin Burns, 10% ownership. Good matchup for him as well against the Chicago White Sox. Then we've got Zach Gallen, 10,300 against the Marlins. What is it about Zach Gallen that makes you like him more than, say, Corbin Burnes against the White Sox or Imanaga against the Cardinals?
So one, for my money, I think he's the best pitcher of the bunch. I know a lot of people would say Burnes. I prefer Gallen. For two, I think he's in the best matchup, non-weather considered. When you consider weather, Imanaga is almost totally out of play. Burnes is very questionable. Gallen is at home against Miami. I think that he's just in the best spot. Burnes is very good as well. His strikeout numbers hadn't been amazing this year. They got spiked up because of a matchup with Seattle. I'm not really buying that that's who he is now. Like, I just feel better about Gallen. I think he's got higher upside in this matchup. He's just my favorite guy on the board. No weather concerns. For me, it's not close. How about you?
Yeah, it's Zach Gallen for me as well. I like the matchup against the Marlins. I like that he's pitching at home. And then also, we have to talk about the weather a little bit with these payoff options. It is convenient that we could just group these guys together talking about weather, because the Cubs-Cardinals game, weather risk. The Orioles-White Sox game, also weather risk. And another thing you have to consider about these games, it's not just there's a chance these games get postponed. It's that these games also, we might end up getting into the third or fourth inning. It starts raining. The pitchers have to come out. So what does that make you do in terms of risk tolerance with these pitchers like Imanaga and like Burnes? Does it make you just not want to play them because we have Gallen as an option? Is it something where it's like, hey, maybe we downgrade them a little bit? Because it's a tricky situation. These are two great pitchers who on paper are in good spots, but you know, it's the weather in baseball, and it sucks that we have to try to figure out what's going to happen with the weather, but it's just part of MLB DFS.
100%. So for me, I like Gallen so much that it's a non-issue. I would be interested in pairing Gallen and Burnes together just because I don't really like any other pitcher on this slate, but it's so cost prohibitive that it's not really that realistic on this slate unless you just really dumpster dive with your stack. I don't really want to do that. It's doable, and you've just got weather concerns. So I do like some of the expensive stacks, but Gallen's a priority for me. I think he's the best play overall on the slate. Now, obviously, some bats are going to go crazy. It's that type of slate, but on paper for me, Gallen is a must play if I were playing one lineup.
Yeah, I agree with you. If I'm paying up for one pitcher today, the answer is going to be Zach Gallen. And I haven't figured out exactly what I want to do with Imanaga and Burnes, because I would like to play them, but maybe I just look at my lineups here as I'm trying to finalize stuff and building everything out, and just kind of say like, hey, if Gallen, I already like him the best. He carries the least amount of risk just based on weather of the three. He's also the cheapest of the three. Maybe I just play this slate and go to Gallen as my spend up option. Don't even play Burnes in the Imanaga, and say like, hey, either I hope those games deal with weather concerns, or Zach Gallen might just flat out outscore these guys anyway, or even if he gets close, he's cheaper. So maybe that is the best way to play the slate while also eliminating risk.
Yeah, that's how I see it now. I do think if you're playing 150, I mean, maybe you have a little bit of them in the pool. I'm not sure if it's worth it, but at least in Burnes' case, like, I think there's real upside in this matchup. And I think the weather spot is better than Imanaga's. Imanaga's also too expensive in my eyes. So I would play some of Burnes maybe, but I think just crossing off Imanaga makes a lot of sense.
So let's go ahead and look at some of the other pitching options that we have to consider on the slate. And let's look at all of the guys 9,200 to 8,000 now, which there's a big price gap too, because you get Zach Gallen at 10,300. Then the next most expensive pitcher, it's Carlos Rodon in a road matchup, tough one against the San Diego Padres at $9,200. So you got then a bunch of pitchers, $9,200 to $8,000, and a handful of them that are popular. Here are the ones that are picking up ownership. We've got Justin Verlander, 22% owned. He's had a little bit of a down year, but great matchup for him against the Oakland A's. He's, like I said, 8,600, 22% owned. Bailey Ober pitching against the Texas Rangers, 17% owned. Kind of tough matchup. I'm a little surprised Ober's picking up as much ownership as he is. And then we've got Yu Darvish, another tough matchup. Yu Darvish against the Yankees, 8K. He is 26% owned, Matt. So of these pitchers, Verlander, Ober, Yu Darvish, do any of them look like good chalk to you?
Man, no, but you have to play someone on this slate. So no, none of them look like good chalk to me. That doesn't mean that they'll all be bad. They'll probably all be good, but no. How about you?
Verlander, to me, is somebody that I am interested in playing here against the Texas Rangers. And I know that at some point, Father Time is going to catch up to Justin Verlander, and it might have already happened, right? He's dealt with injuries in recent years. We've seen some downtick in his performance. The thing about Verlander, though, is even a downtick in his performance and a dip in strikeout rate, which started last year, we saw a dip in strikeout rate. He is still a pitcher with a 3.97 ERA, a 3.89 expected ERA. His strikeout rate, once again, it started the dip last year. He had a 21.5% K rate last year, which was by far the lowest of his career. This year, it's even lower at 18.7%, but he still hasn't been terrible. He's just been somewhere around a league average pitcher. He's also had a bunch of difficult matchups, particularly for strikeouts. His last start was against the Milwaukee Brewers. He's also only made 6 starts this year. He had a late start to the year, so there was probably a little bit of a ramp-up period here for him. But, on the road against the Nationals, it's not a great offense, but it's fairly difficult to strike out. Then he goes on the road against the Cubs. That's a tough matchup. Pitches against the Guardians, tough matchup for strikeouts. On the road against the Yankees. And like I said, last time out against the Brewers. So he hasn't had the most favorable matchups for strikeouts on paper. I think ultimately he's probably close to last year's 21% K rate. It's just really the matchup against an Oakland A's team that, we've talked about numerous times over the last couple of weeks about how they've overperformed to start the year. We're expecting regression. It's a good pitcher's park as well for him that he's going to be pitching here, on the road against Oakland. So I like Justin Verlander, and the ownership at 22%. It's not that prohibitive.
Okay, I have no arguments with that. I mean, I think you can make a case for any of these guys looking the best, but I do think Verlander comes in as the highest owned. Just from reading the tea leaves across the industry, like he's getting pumped because of, this spot, the fact that his underlines, aside from his strikeout rate, like aren't bad. My thing is like Gallen is such a priority for me. Do I want to play, pay up for 2 pitchers like that? Because Verlander's not cheap, but there aren't good cheap options either. So this is ultimately why I like Gallen so much. There's no other pitcher I really like on this slate.
Yeah, makes sense. Any other thoughts on these pitchers in the 8K range? Do you like any of the contrarian options in this pricing range?
Not really. I mean, I think you could make a case for Rodon, even though he's pricey, because he's probably been the best pitcher of this bunch this year. San Diego has struggled against left-handed pitching. Now, they've shuffled their lineup around a bit. You've got Arias, who's very annoying to face. I don't love Rodon here, but as a contrarian option, I think he stands out a little bit.
I just don't like the matchup. And also, I'm still kind of skeptical. It's funny. At the start of the year, I was thinking like, hey guys, Rodon could have a bounce back season. And people were all upset about, Rodon sucks. He's washed and all of that. And then as the season went on, he puts together some good starts like on paper, but the underlying numbers have been okay, not great. And people just kind of keep playing Rodon. And I know that he's not crazy popular, but still, 5% owned on a big slate on the road against the Padres. That's still kind of more ownership than I would like him to have here. So if I'm playing one guy in this price range, it's just give me Verlander, what I perceive to be what should be the easiest matchup.
Yeah, I have no arguments with that. Miguel Andujar back in our lives hitting cleanup for Oakland. So, yeah, they've been feisty lately, but I think that kind of tells you all you need to know about the state of their lineup. Miguel Andujar hitting cleanup. Former Yankee great.
Do you remember when he was really hyped up, Andujar?
Oh, yeah.
Which also part of it was because he was on the Yankees at the time. So people were, like Yankees prospects always get a little bit more hype than other team prospects. The Yankees for the longest time had just the shittiest farm system because whenever they had anybody who's a decent prospect, they would just parlay them together to try to trade for a star. But anyway, yeah, I like going to Justin Verlander here. I like the matchup that he has. That's where I like going the most in this pricing range for myself. Let's look at the 7K pitchers now. And once again, handful of popular pitchers in the 7K range. And then after this, there's nobody that the field is getting to as a punt. So we'll see if there's anybody we could mine out as a potential punt option. But so far, I have gone with Zach Gallen on the high end. I like Justin Verlander, the 8K range. Here's what we have in the 7K range, Matt. Christian Scott is $7,900 pitching against the Giants, 27% owned. Patrick Sandoval, $7,700, 24% owned against your Cleveland Guardians. And we've got Christopher Sanchez, 21% owned on the road in Coors Field. People don't give a fuck about Coors Field anymore. Like, we're picking on this Colorado Rockies offense. We've seen this time and time again now. A couple of other pitchers in this price range. Actually, just one other pitcher in the pricing range. Logan Allen at $7,400. He is 5% owned against the Los Angeles Angels. So there's only 4 pitchers priced in the 7K range, Matt. And of those 4, 3 of them over 20% owned. Do you like any of these pitchers?
I think Christian Scott makes the most sense. He's probably my second favorite pitcher on the slate. Unproven, has only made 3 starts, but he's been excellent in pretty much every level he's pitched at. His underlyings are really, really good. I don't love the matchup against San Francisco. We saw they were pesky against Paul Skeens yesterday. And I do think Scott ends up being very popular as well. I think Gallen, usually the highest priced pitcher ends up getting a boost in ownership. I don't think that's the case with Gallen tonight because high priced bats are the priority.
Yeah.
I think you could see Scott, Darvish, and Verlander, the highest owned pitchers on the slate. We'll see. Scott, I feel the best about. He's the cheapest of the bunch. Again, I don't think he's safe. And if you told me a San Francisco stack took down the slate, Scott isn't one of those pitchers where I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. But given what we're working with, he's priced right in a good matchup. Ownership isn't crazy. I think he looks good. I cannot get on board with Sanchez at all. And the other guy was Sandoval. I think he's getting too much ownership. Give me Scott over Sandoval. Cleveland has struck out more against left-handed pitching, but they've also been very good. I'm not playing a chalky Sandoval. Give me Scott amongst that group. How say you?
Yeah, Scott as well. The Sandoval ownership is weird to me because he's fine, right? He's like a mediocre pitcher. He's got a mediocre matchup. He's at I'm skeptical he's actually going to be as popular as he is.
I agree with that.
That was me. I'm skeptical he's going to be as popular as his ownership projection.
So the reason I'll agree with you is because I've talked about how Verlander and Scott are going to get bumped up. Well, that has to come from somewhere, right? So a guy like Sandoval makes a lot of sense where instead of the 25%, he's 17%. I could easily see that. Cleveland isn't a matchup people really want to pick on. I'm with you.
Any punt options that you're liking? Because nobody's playing this price range. There's a handful of pitchers that are priced cheaply, but none of them are projected for double-digit ownership. Instead, what we're seeing is, at least based on our ownership projections, people are more gravitating towards that 7K range, the 8K range. And if you do pair 2 pitchers in that price range, you could pretty easily get up to the Dodgers. You could get up to the Phillies in that kind of scenario. So there's no real actual need to punt, but it doesn't mean there can't be a pitcher or 2 that stands out to us. So with that in mind, is there anybody you think the field is missing out on by not going cheap at pitcher?
I do. And I don't feel great about it. And this is a classic. You could play both sides because Arizona has been so good against left-handed pitching. But Braxton Garrett, he's just better than a $5,800 pitcher. Our top pitcher tool says it all. His strikeout upside, if nothing else, makes him worth being more expensive than that on DK. Again, I hate the matchup. Arizona is amazing against left-handed pitching. Their lineup is set up to beat lefties. But it doesn't mean a lefty can't have success against them. We just saw Tariq Skubal do it. They're not impervious to getting, they can not do well on any specific game against a left-handed pitcher. So I think Garrett is really, really risky here, but he doesn't look all that different to me than the other mid-range pitchers on this slate. And because Gallen is such a priority, I'm definitely looking at Braxton Garrett for sure. How about you?
All right. So I've got what I think will be my final sim done being run. And I'm happy to bring up Braxton Garrett. Believe it or not, Garrett is currently my 3rd most rostered pitcher. He's the pitcher I'm getting the 3rd most exposure to. He is in, and it's kind of spread out my ownership, both at offense and pitcher. But so I don't have any pitcher that's in 40% of lineups or anything. But I have Braxton Garrett in about a quarter of my lineups now, slightly more than that. So I'm with you. I do think that Braxton Garrett is somebody who makes sense. He's only $5,800. So you are getting yourself all kinds of pricing savings by playing with $5,800. Got this Diamondbacks offense that has been okay this year. They were really good last year, probably overachieved a little bit. But I mean, if you look at all the pitchers we have for cheap, once again, none of them are popular. Garrett is the most popular, but it's still only 9% ownership. And I think the field is sleeping on him a little bit. We don't have to worry about some of those weather concerns with the spend up options. There's a little bit of strikeout upside for Braxton Garrett as well. His numbers this year, hard to put too much stock in him. He's only made 2 starts. He's pitching 9 innings. So I don't really know exactly what to make of that. But if you look at Garrett last year, 3.66 ERA, 3.68 FIP. The year before, 3.58 ERA, 3.56 FIP. As far as strikeouts are concerned, he's always been solid, right? Like mid 20% range strikeouts. So I don't think this guy is bad by any means. He's been like pretty solid for a few years, and he's just crazy cheap, and nobody's really playing him.
He's good, like in my opinion. He's got good strikeout upside. He's one of like the Marlins better, like pitching. He's not really a prospect anymore, but he's certainly not a veteran. And he just was hurt, and he's only making his 3rd start. He's been very unlucky. Now, that's not to say he's been good, because like his overall stats are horrendous. So just because his underlines are a little bit better doesn't mean all that much, but it means something. And even in a tough spot, again, I've said it a couple times, I don't like the pitching options on this slate. I think Braxton Garrett is just as good of a pitcher, if not better than a lot of those mid-tier guys. I hate the spot, but he's so much cheaper. Yeah, I'm on Braxton Garrett. Who do you prefer, all things considered? Christian Scott or Braxton Garrett? Like, who's your second and first highest owned pitchers the Sims are pumping out?
So I've got a bunch of guys grouped really close. Here's actually the easiest way to do it. I've got, as far as my ownership goes in the Sims, I really do like Zach Gallen, but it's not really getting me to him. So he's not one of the pitchers I have the most exposure to, but still I have double-digit exposure to him. Here's the guys that I have the most of. It's this 4 group of guys: Verlander, Scott, Garrett, Sanchez. And like I typically don't love playing popular pitchers at Coors Field, but I mean, even with Christopher Sanchez being projected for like modest fantasy points in the teens, I still end up getting overweight to him. So it's the mid-range pitchers that I'm getting to, and then Braxton Garrett is being a contrarian pitcher I'm getting to for very cheap.
Yeah, I think that's how a lot of the field's going to play it, because there's very expensive bats to pay up for.
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing with my pitching here. And unless something weird ends up coming out with lineups here, I don't think that's going to change all that much. If I had to roster somebody on the spend up, Zach Allen is the one that I get the most of, but just don't get to him as much as some of these mid-range pitchers. Anything else you want to add at pitchers on DK? If not, we'll look at some FanDuel pitchers.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so let's look at the FanDuel side of things, and I'll refresh ownership here. See if anything looks different from before. And here's what we have as far as spend up options go on FanDuel. Imanaga is 11K. Corbin Burns is 10,600. Zach Gallen, 10,200. Justin Verlander, this kind of goes to show that Verlander's a little bit mispriced on DraftKings. He's $9,800 on FanDuel and the 4th most expensive pitcher overall on FanDuel. Rodon is $9,500. Yu Darvish is $9,400. Cutter Crawford, $9,200. So of all these pitchers that are 9K and above, safe to assume that Zach Gallen is your favorite just as he is on DK?
100%.
Yeah, same for me. And also, it's so much easier to get to him on FanDuel because of the fact that pricing is so much softer. If we look overall at everything on FanDuel, here's what's most surprising to me. The chalk on FanDuel is Patrick Sandoval. He's the most popular pitcher, and not by a little amount either. He is nearly 20% owned when the next most popular pitcher is Christian Scott at 14%. I'm just confused by this. Why does the field like and it's not to say Patrick Sandoval is unplayable or anything. I don't understand why he's the most popular pitcher on FanDuel and why he's like as popular as guys like Christian Scott and Justin Verlander over on DraftKings. Now, watch him go out and strike out like a dozen hitters or something like that. I don't hate Patrick Sandoval. I just don't know why on FanDuel the field is like, yeah, we need to roster him twice as much as Zach Gallen.
I agree. It's a pricing thing, though. It goes back to what I've been saying about FanDuel. The pricing is condensed, and they price pitchers up. And Sandoval's only 200 more than Braxton Garrett. So he's like the cheapest viable option in people's eyes here. So the ownership is just flooding there because, again, just like on DK, expensive stacks is how I see it, at least.
Yeah, so just because of ownership, I don't really have all that much interest in Sandoval. And let's see, for my DK lineups, yeah, I've got Sandoval in single-digit amount of lineups. So, it's like a third of what the field has of him, something like that. But let's look at the other options on FanDuel, right? So we're liking Zach Allen as a spend up option. Is there anybody that you like for below 9K if the guy that we're going to is not going to be Sandoval?
Ooh, is there anyone I like below 9K?
I
Yeah,
mean,
it's Christian
I know
Scott.
what my answer is.
Yeah, Christian Scott for me. He's still too cheap. I think that he's the clear guy to get to.
$8,200 for Christian Scott on FanDuel, 14% owned. Another one here, like why does Braxton Garrett, sorry, not Braxton Garrett, why does Patrick Sandoval have 50% more ownership than Christian Scott at a comparable price tag? Christian Scott pitching at home. It's a better pitcher's ballpark. He's got a matchup here against the San Francisco Giants, which I also think is a better matchup than the matchup against the Cleveland Guardians. So if I'm going expensive on FanDuel, my guy to go to is going to be Zach Allen. If I'm going cheap on FanDuel, my guy is Christian Scott. Anything else that stands out to you about the pitchers on FanDuel?
No, it looks similar, but again, pricing's more condensed and Garrett isn't as viable there, even by a little bit.
See if there's any questions for us in Discord. If not, oh, there is one here. Okay, so I will answer this question from Sniffs. And then, Jacob, we're going to build some lineups in the lineup generator right after that. If you could pull that up, and then I'll open up YouTube so that I could watch the lineup generator on YouTube to see what it is that we're getting to, Jacob, because I know that's what you're going to say to me next. Sniffs1234 says, what about Sanchez home versus away? That's kind of hard to ignore. Like his splits?
Yeah.
Let's look at his splits. I'm going to assume this is a very small sample size.
It is. He's been awful on the road this year. Very good at home. He is not the type of pitcher I like playing in cores, but that's just me.
No, he did ask about Christopher. My bad. I thought he asked about Sanchez. I typed in Christopher Scott. All right, so let's go. Christopher Sanchez splits. Splits this year. Okay, so one thing I'm going to note right here, he's pitched 18 innings on the road this season. That doesn't really mean much to me. It's hard.
Well, part of the reason he's only pitched,
a young pitcher. We don't have that much data on him. Like, there's not a reason to think that he's going to be a guy or that any pitcher would have like double the ERA on the road that they have at home.
I agree with that. I will say though, part of the reason he's only pitched 18 innings is because he hasn't pitched well on the road. But it's just a small sample size thing. I'm totally with you there too.
Yeah, so his starts, let's look at his underlying numbers for his starts on the road. So his last start against the Mets, he had his last start against the Mets on the road is actually a pretty solid one. He had a 2.96 FIP. Start before that against the Angels, that was not a good one. He had a 6.54 FIP. Start before that on the road was against the Reds, 4.14 FIP. That's fine. And the start before that against the Nationals, he wasn't great in that one either, 4.75 FIP. But still, I mean, we're looking at 18 innings. Is he going to be worse on the road than at home? Most pitchers are, yeah. But, I mean, not to the point where I'd be like, oh, my God, this is a guy we always have to play at home and fade when he's on the road. But, you know, Coors Field game, there's always going to be risk with pitchers when they are going into Colorado and pitching at Coors Field. So I'm not going to tell you he's safe, but I'm willing to play him in tournaments. Then Einstein is asking, is Sandoval really that much better of an option than Logan Allen? Not to me.
Better, but not so much better.
I would say he's marginally better. He's not. Logan Allen is 2% owned and Patrick Sandoval is 19% owned. I don't think he's 10x better than Logan Allen, which is what the ownership difference is.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So I was looking at the FanDuel ownership there. Let me see for DraftKings. It's 5.2% ownership to Logan Allen to 90. What was the number again? Sandoval 23 point. Yeah, but I mean, same deal. He's 6x the ownership over on DraftKings, 10x the ownership over on FanDuel. Yeah, is Sandoval marginally better? Sure. Is he 6x better? No, certainly not the case. Not the case at all. So let's go and build some lineups in the lineup generator now. We'll see what we're getting to over there. And if you guys could do us a favor here, if you haven't yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you do want to sign up for any of the packages we have at Stochastic, including the lineup generator package, which it'll build lineups for you. It's going to give you our player projections, our ownership projections. That's included in it. You can customize some of these lineups. Sign up using the link below. Less than $15 to sign up for it. Jacob, let's start with DraftKings. We'll build lineups for FanDuel right after this. But let's go with all stack types and go balance lineups. Don't lock anybody in. And now save 20 lineups, and then we'll check what the exposures are. You have to get to 20, go view saved lineups. All right. And now we see the exposures. All right. So first thing that stands out to me, GT Real Muto is in about half of our lineups. A lot of Red Sox that are showing up in here as well. Let's see. Pitcher exposures. Boy, lineup generator doesn't agree with us, Matt. It is giving us Patrick Sandoval as our most rostered pitcher. I don't agree with that whatsoever. So I'm going to have a difference of opinion with the lineup generator here. Then we got Yu Darvish in some lineups. Scroll down a little bit, Jacob. I want to see what the other pitcher exposures are. A little bit overweight to Christopher Sanchez, Corbin Burns, Christian Scott in lineups. You know, Corbin Burns, if I knew for sure that game is playing, I would love getting to Corbin Burns today. There's just a little bit of weather risk involved there. So it depends how risk tolerant you guys are willing to be with the rain for today. Click on the stack exposures. Let's see what the stack exposures are looking like, Jacob. Yeah, so as far as stacks, Phillies, Dodgers, no surprise on either of those two teams. I think they're the two best teams to be getting to in large field tournaments. And then the Boston Red Sox also showing up in a good amount of lineups here, Matt. So let's talk about these three different stacks on DraftKings. First, what do you make of the chalk offenses? Philadelphia Phillies, Los Angeles Dodgers. Are these teams you like for large field tournaments? And then we'll talk about them in single entry as well. But first, large field tournaments, what do you make of the Dodgers and the Phillies?
The two best teams on the slate, I think, unequivocally. Certainly the Phillies, by far the top stack on the board. Ownership projections aren't even close to what they should be owned. So Phillies look great. So are the Dodgers. Massive ballpark upgrade for them. Graham Ashcraft doesn't strike too many guys out. He just faced this Dodgers lineup and was okay like the first two times through and then struggled mightily. So I'm not buying him. Both these offenses look really, really, really good and are tough fades.
And then on the other side of this, how popular do you think they're going to be in single entry on an 11-game slate? Are you willing to play them in a single entry contest, or are you going to look elsewhere? Talking about the Dodgers and the Phillies. So we'll just talk about these teams for now. Too popular for you in single entry? Are you willing to play them? Or are you going to go elsewhere? And if you are going to go elsewhere, we'll talk about which team you might like to get to after this.
I'm still torn. I'm not sure. I do think both these teams are going to be very, very high owned. And, you know, maybe as full stacks, not as much. Like there's just going to be pieces of each very high owned. I think I'm going to get different because you can basically go anywhere else outside of those teams in Boston and they're not going to be owned. But I'm tempted to play Philly just because they look very, very under-owned. How do you see it?
It's tough. So I'm in between the Phillies in single entry or just going to another team entirely, because there are some really contrarian offenses that I'm liking for today. And my offense exposure, there are, let's see, what are the teams? I've got 4 offenses I'm really building around for large field tournaments. 2 of them very obvious. Dodgers, Phillies. You want to try to guess who the other 2 are?
So Dodgers, Phillies. Mm-hmm. Then I'm going to say, man, I'm not sure about Boston because, well, it's not Boston because the value isn't mattering as much. I am going to say the Brewers. Is it the Brewers?
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, I'm just going to say a team I really like, Texas. Okay. Is it Texas?
It is not. I'll tell you a team that I am interested in that also happens to be fairly cheap today. So the team that has the second highest top value odds for us today is the Cincinnati Reds. Remember you and I were messaging the other day about, somebody had asked us a question about James Paxton. And you had brought up, have you looked at James Paxton's underlying numbers? And I've like peripherally seen them. I hadn't really looked too much into them. They're very bad. He has a 2.84 ERA. These underlying numbers for James Paxton, though, which also come with like a crazy, crazy dip in fastball velocity, considering the injury history of James Paxton, I'm going to make a weird prediction that I don't often make. I think James Paxton goes on the injured list soon. And I think one of the reasons that he's kind of just playing through whatever's going on is he has a 2.84 ERA. So there's something where it's just like, I'll just pitch through this. He's a 2.84 ERA. He's a 5.55 expected ERA. He has a 5.14 FIP. For his career, James Paxton has a 95.6 mile per hour average fastball velocity. Last year, coming off injury, was 95.3. It is 93.8 this year. The only other year we have seen him with an average fastball velocity lower than 95, and keep in mind, 93.8 is way different than 95, was in 2020. And that was the year he made 5 starts with the Yankees, blew out his arm with an average fastball velocity of 92.6, and just wasn't able to finish the season. I don't think Paxton is healthy right now. Paxton's really been healthy over the course of his career. So it's like never at all bold of a prediction to think that he's dealing with something underlying. But with the velocity being this far down and how bad his underlying numbers are, this guy's generating no swing and misses. He's a 13% strikeout rate, a 13% walk rate. I love the Reds today. I'm very strongly considering playing them in single entry.
I have no argument to that. His underlying suggests that he might be the worst pitcher on the slate, at least one of them. I mean, they're Ty Black bad. So I do think you have some pinch hit risk like in this order, not with the main guys, but like what's his name leading off? Fairchild. Like he'll probably get pinch hit for. But yeah, I think their big bats are probably will definitely be not as owned as the Dodgers and the Phillies. So basically any other team is going to be a contrarian play in tournaments.
Yeah, and we've got, Sean V was agreeing with me in the chat. He says Paxton is so bad. And I mean, still, even in 2024, we see the field looks at ERA more than anything else for pitchers. So I know that because there's a high team total on the Reds, because books understand that Paxton's been pretty shitty this year. I don't know if the field is going to be clamoring to roster the Reds. So that's the team I'm leaning towards in single entry. You know, it's a better spot for the Dodgers, a better spot for the Phillies. But I think I might be able to get the Reds at fairly low ownership in single entry, and Paxton's numbers make it look like he's a disaster right now.
Yeah, I have absolutely zero arguments with that. I will say, like, they will not be as high owned as the Phillies and the Dodgers and the Red Sox. But of those next teams, I mean, in our projections, they're projected to be the highest owned amongst them. So I don't think you're sneaking up on anyone by playing them or the Diamondbacks. I wouldn't be worried about those teams' ownership, but I'm also interested in teams like I mentioned, Texas, who are just really good and not getting any ownership because of the slate.
So is that Texas, is that team you're considering for single entry? And also I've talked myself into it. I'm playing the Reds in single entry. And then once I say it out loud, I have to do it. That's how these things work. So I'm playing the Reds in single entry.
Texas is definitely a team I'm considering. It's obviously not as good of a spot as those other teams, and they haven't been great, but they're much better against right-handed pitching. Adolis Garcia's back. He homered yesterday. Seager's on fire. And we know Bailey Ober can get hit when his stuff isn't on. So yeah, Texas is a team I'm highly considering for sure.
All right, let's build actually 1 second, Jacob, if you wouldn't mind, can you go back to the lineup generator? We'll build lineups for FanDuel in a second. But one thing I want to do before that is look at some of the individual hitters we have the most exposure to. Then we'll build out our FanDuel lineups, and then we'll talk about the rest of the stacks and any questions that we might have. I see there's one for us from Einsteinium in the Discord channel. But first, and also people who are asking about bats for cash games, Dodgers and Phillies, like super, super simple. Dodgers and Phillies in cash games, and then go with for pitchers in cash games. That's where you're probably going to be looking at, like, you know, Christian Scott, Justin Verlander. Those are the pitchers I go to in cash games, and then you could spend up a hitter a little bit. Phillies, Dodgers, load up on those hitters in cash. But as far as the hitters we're getting to in the lineup generator here, Real Muto from the Phillies, Whit Merrifield from the Phillies, and then a bunch of hitters popping up from the Red Sox as well. Duran, Abreu, Dominic Smith, Devers, David Hamilton, and then Gavin Lux, Shohei Ohtani, Chris Taylor. So you're seeing here, lineup generator is giving us Phillies, Dodgers, Red Sox, and then kind of spread out as far as pitching goes. Let's look at the FanDuel side of things now, Jacob. We'll build FanDuel lineups. And then we'll see what stacks that we might like on FanDuel that either might be the same or different from what we're liking on DK. And yeah, same deal. Go, just FanDuel, go balance lineups. Don't lock anything in, all stack types. Yeah, and then once we get to 20, we'll look at what the exposures are. Also, shout out to DraftKings Pick Six sponsoring the show today. If you guys haven't checked out DraftKings Pick Six, I'm still very much waiting for this to get legalized in New Jersey. I want to be able to play. It's games you're playing. You're taking, like over-unders on props, but in a tournament setting, you're playing against other people in it. And the field appears to be very dumb playing this. Like there was a slate I saw where Donovan Mitchell was ruled out and a bunch of people played his unders. So I want to be able to play Pick Six. If you guys are in a state that has Pick Six, go check it out. It seems like a really easy way to make some money. FanDuel, let's see, what are we getting to here? No surprise, Phillies popping up again. Real Muto is our most rostered hitter on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Pitchers, Sandoval again. Boo. I don't like Sandoval. Scroll down here, Jacob. Let's see what else we have. Christopher Sanchez, I feel better about that. Zach Gallen, like him as a pay-up option. That's going to handle most of our pitcher exposure. So let's look at the stack exposures now. Yeah, lots of Phillies, lots of Dodgers. Reds, hey, Reds. Red Sox, Orioles showing up in lineups if you guys are willing to tolerate some of the risk with weather. This looks like a pretty good mix of stacks here, Matt. A bunch of Phillies, Dodgers, Reds, Red Sox. This is more or less the offenses I like today that are showing up.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. There's just a bunch of good offenses, but the real good ones stand out.
If you were playing one team on FanDuel in a large field tournament and you had to enter that lineup right now, which team would you be stacking? Who would be the priority stack?
That's a good question. I think my answer right now would be Philly, just because they're not getting hold on one second. I'm refreshing ownership.
Yeah.
I might have been looking at DK. Sorry.
It's Philly for me, by the way.
Okay, hold on. Give me 1 second. The ownership looks kind of similar to DK because they're more expensive than the Dodgers. So it's definitely Philly here as well.
And also we talked about like Christian Scott being in the low 8K range, not all that popular on FanDuel. I think it's pretty reasonable build. You go to Christian Scott at pitcher, you roster the Phillies offense, which here for reference in our top stacks tool, Phillies 12.5% owned, Dodgers 15.4% owned, but we've got the Phillies 19.4% chance to be the top scoring team on FanDuel, 13.4% chance for the Dodgers. I really like the Phillies on FanDuel and DraftKings, but especially over on FanDuel where the Dodgers are picking up, 3% more ownership points as the team. So Phillies for me, if you're going to be contrarian on FanDuel, who is the team that you like for a little bit less ownership on FanDuel and maybe you'd consider in a single entry?
I'm going to say, all things considered, give me the ownership isn't the same, but give me Colorado. I like them on DK too, especially with the Sanchez ownership. But even without it, I kind of like them on FanDuel, and they're coming in with a lot of leverage. So give me the Rockies.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Let me see. For myself on FanDuel, I'll say Houston on FanDuel going up against Ross Stripling. It's another expensive offense. The field isn't going to be on them at all in single entry because if people are paying up, they're going to either the Phillies or the Dodgers. But Astros, I think that's an interesting one against Ross Stripling. So that's going to do it for us in the lineup generator here. So let's go back to talking about stacks as a whole here, Matt. And first off, are there any stacks that you're liking for leverage purposes? Any popular pitchers that you're looking to potentially stack against?
Yeah, I think I just kind of alluded to it. It's going to be the Rockies for me. Sanchez projected for ownership here, and I like the Rockies. I think their lineup sets up well for against left-handed pitching. They're not expensive with McMahon not in the lineup. So, yeah, McMahon not being in the lineup hurts, but he's a lefty on left anyways. So it's the Rockies for me. How about you?
Yeah, if I'm picking a leverage stack, not that like I have a ton of exposure to the Rockies, but I'm overweight to them. I have them in, 6% of lineups, and their ownership is, where was it? I've got the FanDuel ownership right now, so I'll go back to the DraftKings ownership. Yeah, Rockies ownership, it's 4.5% on DraftKings. So a little bit overweight to them. You're getting some of that leverage off of Christopher Sanchez. It's the Rockies, so it's never the best spot in the world, but we've had success stacking the Rockies against some chalky pitchers at times this year. It's not a team I'm considering for single entry. And if you guys are playing 1, 2, 3 lineups, wouldn't play the Rockies, but large field tournaments, yeah, I'm a little bit overweight to them. They're cheap. They're going up against a pitcher that's popular. People have brought up the fact that Sanchez has struggled on the road this year. There's a little bit of a ceiling for them, and it's something I'm interested in at low ownership at Coors Field. Let me think. I don't think there's any other popular pitchers that I'm really stacking against, though. Did I get to any of Cleveland? Actually, here I do have a little bit of Cleveland, which is mostly just because the ownership on Sandoval is so high to me. And this is another, they're 2% owned, the Guardians, so it's a team that's pretty easy to get overweight to. So 4% Guardian stacks, that has me about double the field on them. No real big stand, but those are the two chalk pitchers. Patrick Sandoval stacking a little bit against him with Cleveland. Christopher Sanchez stacking against him a little bit with Colorado. This isn't really leverage, but you and I both talked about liking Braxton Garrett before. The Arizona Diamondbacks are another team that I'm getting some exposure to. I just think it's a team that has upside. It's weird because they're cheap, but also Braxton Garrett is fairly cheap. So that's another team I get a good amount of exposure to as a stack, but not necessarily makes the same waves as a leverage stack. Anything else that stands out to you as far as stacks are concerned for today?
I don't think so.
We got a question in the Discord chat here. Also, any updates on what you're going to do about the weather in the Chicago games?
No, I haven't even checked since we last talked about it, but let me do that and I'll get right back to you on that.
Yeah, and while we do, we got a question from Einstein. He wants to know, how do we feel about Houston? It appears to be good weather for bats in Oakland. So, yeah, clearly a park downgrade for them. Oakland is a tough park for hitters for sure. But Ross Stripling is not a pitcher I'm particularly high on. We do have Houston with the third overall highest top stack odds. I mentioned before they're a contrarian team I like on FanDuel. I feel the same on DraftKings. Houston's a good team to get overweight to the field too. You have to pair some cheap starting pitching to make the pricing work, but I think it's worthwhile. This is a Houston team that's really starting to come together, which is no surprise. We knew that was going to happen sooner rather than later. But yeah, I think Oakland is a team that warrants more ownership than what they're getting. Only project for 4.7% ownership. If the field is paying up for bats, they're going to Philly, they're going to the Dodgers, not as much to Houston. Einsteinium, I think it is a good spot for Houston. But weather updates, what are you thinking you're doing there?
I'm still not playing those games. Nothing's really changed. It might change after lock, but I'm probably not going to get on anything from those games no matter what.
Yeah, and we've got R. Stanley 788 in chat says he's running late. Any bad weather games? Yeah, so there's two iffy weather spots, and they're not like unplayably bad, but they carry risk. We've got the Baltimore-Chicago White Sox game. That's one that has weather concerns. Same with the Chicago-St. Louis game. So both of them could potentially get postponed. Both of them are also live to start and then stop in the middle and then either start up again later in the night where starting pitching has to come out, or you could get a scenario where these games start, they play halfway through and don't finish. We saw that in, what was it? A Cardinals-Orioles game the other day, I think it was, where the pitchers, it was Lance Lynn and somebody else. We only got through like 5.5 innings. The score was 1-1. Game didn't finish. I think that could happen in either of these games potentially today. So the weather isn't so bad that they're guaranteed to rain out. But if you're playing one lineup, 2, 3 lineups today, I would recommend you take them out of the player pool. There's enough good options. You could kind of look elsewhere.
100% with you.
Any other really low-owned offenses that stand out to you for any reason? It doesn't have to be one that you think warrants a bunch of exposure, but maybe a contrarian offense or two that you think should be getting ownership that the field isn't quite getting to.
Oh, man, that's a good one. For me, it's Texas. Ober's good, but he's not impervious to getting hit. And when he is not on, he gets hit hard. We've seen it a couple of times this year. Texas is going to break out of it sooner rather than later. And they're getting no ownership despite being right in the middle of the top stack tool. I like them as a very, very contrarian stack that just many people aren't going to be on.
Yeah, so EMAC has asked a question here. EMAC asks, what is the best way to take out games for weather in the sim? So for a day like today, where I don't think the games are necessarily going to rain out, like I don't think that's the most likely outcome, but if you just don't want to get exposed to them, here's what you do, EMAC. EMAC, go into when you're, after you built out your contest pool, and then you go to the sim and you go to the projections page, put everybody in for 0 fantasy points. So everybody from the White Sox, put them in for 0 fantasy points. Everyone from the Orioles, 0 fantasy points. Cardinal, you get the idea. All those players, and it's pretty easy to sort by them. You could go to the filters, you go to team, and you just type in, the initials of the team, and then just put all the players who are starting in for 0 fantasy points. When you run the Sims, it won't give you any of those guys in that scenario. Let me double check my exposures here. And yeah, I've talked about the Dodgers, talked about the Diamondbacks, the Reds, the Phillies. Those are all teams that are like the core offenses for me. Talked about the Houston Astros being a team I like getting a little bit overweight to the field too. But yeah, we've talked about all the offenses that are important to me. So if there are no other questions, which I'll double check the YouTube chat, then we can do our home run picks here. Josh Gillum did ask us about, Sean V saying, Jose Urena is still pitching. I have no clue how Jose Urena is still pitching in the big leagues. Like, what team is like, this is the guy? Like, yeah, it didn't work for, he's been terrible the last 7 years with the 5 different teams he's been on, but this is the time it's going to be different. Yeah, it's pretty wild. But Josh Gillum is asking us about twin stacks for today. Do I have exposure to the Twins in a meaningful way? I've got a couple lineups with them, nothing all that significant though. And then somebody else in chat had asked about Rodon in single entry. I would not play Rodon in single entry. Tough matchup for him. He's been okay, not great this year. There's just so many other pitchers to like on the slate. Is Carlos Rodon somebody you'd be considering in single entry?
Not even a little bit.
All right. And then EMAC also wants to know, when will the Sims control the weather? That's the next thing that's coming is maybe late swap where you need a game to get rained out. You just pull the weather lever, and then the game gets rained out. It's a future feature that we're working on over here. Let's go ahead and do our home run picks for the day, and then we'll be done for the night. If you guys haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Matt, who's homering today? And people in chat, throw in your homer picks as well. We'll read some of them off here. Who's your pick? Who's going yard? You know the deal. Nobody's allowed to pick Coors Field. Coors Field is cheating.
Who is homering today? I am going to go with Corey Seager.
All right. Who do I want to go? I'm going with the Reds hitter. Which one, though? All right. I've got my pick. Tyler Stevenson. Tyler Stevenson is going to be my home run pick for today. Let's get a home run out of the catcher spot with Tyler Stevenson. He's got a lot of pop in his bat. He's going up against James Paxton, he's getting hit hard. He's not generating strikeouts. I really do like this spot for the Reds. Tyler Stevenson for me. And then Einstein wants to know our thoughts on Milwaukee. I have one of my 150 lineups as a Milwaukee stack. So that is a no for me. No for me on Milwaukee. And let's see what we have for home run picks in the chat. And then we'll wrap it up here for the day. We've got lots of picks coming in. Free Scotty. So this is the free Scotty. He's also got the picture of Scotty Scheffler in the orange jumpsuit here. He's going with Juan Soto for his home run pick. Sean V. Goes Kyle Schwarber. Sean, what are we doing here? No cheating. No cheating. Banned from home runs. No more. Your players aren't allowed to homer today because that was your home run pick. None of them are allowed to hit home runs today. Jeremiah Johnson going bold. He's going John Singleton, double dong. Michael Roundtree is going with Kevin Pillar and O-Hop. Timothy Lee going Ellie De La Cruz. Boy, that would be great for me. I hope so. Max Video going Patrick Bailey. Will the Bills got Christian Walker. Emax got Marcus Semien. Andre Bees got Carlos Correa. CJ the Great is going with Max Steer. Spencer Steer. Malucar is going Freddie Freeman. Casey Leatherwood also going with Spencer Steer. And then adding Lourdes Gurriel into there. Charlie's going with Pete Alonso. Jamie Moore's going with Gunnar Henderson. Alvin Dimmery's got Rafael Devers. Calvin Sanders going Max Kepler. Folk Matt's going with Mark Ventos. Sotex has got Pete Alonso. Brandon's going with Mookie Betts. And then Sean V is doubling down and is going with Kyle Schwarber yet again. But once again, the rules of the game. The rules of the game, Sean. You're not allowed to pick people from Coors Field. And then he follows up and says he cheated. Look, baseball does not respond kindly to cheaters. That's actually not true at all. So, yeah, maybe cheating is the way to go in baseball. And then we've got Alvin also is going with Chris Morel in here. Mike Campbell went with Brent Rooker. And then Dave Jones is going with Kyle Tucker. Andy Millman has got Andy Pajes as his answer there. So, guys, thank you very much for watching. Once again, if you haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. In about an hour and a half, or what is it, 2 hours from now, Eric and myself are going to be doing NBA Live before lock. And then after that, myself and Ben Raza, we're going to be sweating the basketball game over on Playback. Can my Minnesota Timberwolves get the series even at 1? Help me make some money. I hope so. So come watch that with us on Playback later on today. Other than that, guys, thank you very much for watching. Have a great night. Hope to see you later. If I don't, have a great weekend. Enjoy Memorial Day. Have a good night. Peace out.